So hello everyone, we're from Module 1, and today we're going to be talking about Wilhelm Stuckart and if he did show moral courage.
All right, so for a little bit of historical conference, Wilhelm Stuckart was a Nazi official, and he attended what became known as the Wannsee Conference, which took place on New Year's Day of 1942. So basically what happened is Germany controlled many parts of Russia, and Germany at the time was still winning the war on the Eastern Front. But Stuckart had some different opinions. He had a desire for Aryan race, as in purebloods, and there was a protocol for mixed people as evidence for such desires. And Stuckart argued for the sterilization of mixed blood Germans rather than outright murder of them. There were lots of Jewish residents in Ukraine, and this conference, the Wannsee Conference, was set up to decide, it was originally set up to decide what to do with these Ukrainian Jews. To move on to Stuckart, he was a government bureaucrat. He played a major role in crafting the Nuremberg laws, which governed much of the Nazi regime. And near the end of the war era, he began to gain, how do I say it, a higher rank in the Third Reich. He was not tried as one of the quote-unquote major Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg trials. However, he is still seen by some as an important figure. If not one who's as well known as the other, still an important figure.
So the values of society, like mentioned before, the basic historical context is not Nazi Germany during the Third Reich under Hitler, and the values are as follows. So number one is state versus individual. Citizens were required to put the state's need above their own. Number two, fascism. So centralized autocratic government headed by a dictator. In this situation, it's Hitler. Severe economic and social regimentation and forcible suppression of the opposition. Number three, extreme nationalism. So basically that instilled the value that the good of the state is above the good of the individual, and that by following the state, the citizen is contributing to the government and in turn themselves. So this successfully mobilized the German people and had them contribute to the anti-Semitism and concentration camps that eventually defined the Third Reich. Number four is anti-Semitism. So Jews were perceived as an inferior race and that they were not worthy of being a German citizen. They were limited by the Nuremberg laws and eventually the final solution, and they were treated as less than human. Number five is the master race. The Aryan race was above all others, and Hitler strived for all pure blood Aryans by limiting mixed bloods and banning interracial marriages. Number six is Hitler's absolute dictatorship. So Hitler's words were considered above all others, and it was considered law. So this was enforced by the Enabling Act of 1933.
Stuckart's belief system helped explain his actions during the Reich government reign and help us compare and contrast his perception of morality in the debate of if he showed moral courage or not. For example, his legality was tethered to his morality. As a lawyer, he maintained a critical and analytical perspective towards all documented issues. For example, the Wannsee Conference and the Nuremberg trials. In the Wannsee Conference, he proposed sterilization over genocide against Hitler's wishes. And in the Nuremberg trials, although this was proven to show he wanted to get a lesser sentence, he claimed forced sterilization would prevent less drastic measures taken on the Jews, such as a final solution. Secondly, the administrative costs outweigh the outcome. His administrative side helped explain his morality versus in the debate of whether sterilization is better than genocide. For example, and he also contrasted the Reich government, as Hitler's word was law, considering the Enabling Act, and his ability to stand up against could show a different perspective.
Wilhelm Stuckart's actions are sort of the factors which have allowed us to determine whether he exhibited moral courage. So as stated by Nate, Wilhelm Stuckart was a government bureaucrat in Nazi Germany. He had a very administrative role. He drafted the Wannsee Protocol, which is highly important in considering whether he had moral courage. So the Wannsee Conference, which sort of drafted the Wannsee Protocol, was sort of discussing the issue of mixed race individuals and mixed race people in the Nazi-controlled territories of the Nazi-controlled territories. And essentially, these mixed race people were half Jewish, half something else. And the whole purpose of this conference was to discuss the issue of how to essentially fulfill Hitler's wishes and deal with this so-called problem. So what Stuckart essentially took the position of stating that there would be so much administrative work by essentially taking the time to eradicate the mixed race population in these areas. So thus Stuckart favored essentially sterilizing these individuals because he felt that this would be the more feasible option. It would be more practical. This was a highly immoral choice. Of course, sterilization is highly immoral, but it was less brutal option than murder. So essentially by doing this, by choosing sterilization versus the eradication of the population through murder, Stuckart objects to Hitler's major vision in the final solution, which states that the role of the Nazi is to kill all Jews and mixed race, disabled non-Aryans at any cost. Stuckart essentially took the position of stating that it would be more practical to sterilize them. Thus, he goes against Hitler in the situation. He objects to German law in the situation. And this essentially brings up the whole discussion of violating the law. Stuckart, as a legal theorist, essentially went against German law by going against the message of the final solution because Hitler's word was considered German law. Thus, by favoring sterilization, Stuckart was violating the law as a legal theorist. Stuckart didn't show a willingness to protect the Jews or the mixed race, as his work was clearly justified to be the most administratively feasible option. Additionally, Stuckart was in fact a steadfast admirer of Hitler. For example, his child with Down syndrome was killed under the Nuremberg laws, which he in fact drafted. So this shows that Stuckart was a keen and a fervent believer in the Nazi ideology and his own work in drafting the Nuremberg laws and the Wannsee Protocol.
Now, with all this considered, you have to compare this with the values of a liberal democratic humanistic society, or LDHS. In LDHSs, they focus on social justice, equal laws, and fairness. As a whole, there is a greater emphasis on empathy and recognizing the value of human life. Many believe that you should treat others as if they were yourself. And while these are strong values that moral courage comes out of. However, Stuckart did not have these same values. Instead, he strongly valued the value of law and administration. He did not value human life, as demonstrated while he had a general lack of concern for the human of the Jews that were in this situation. He believed they were second-class citizens and were subhuman, and so therefore he did not have the same values that LDHs have. Furthermore, the purpose behind his actions was not to protect others for the sake of humanity, but instead to follow the purpose of legality and administration. He was not driven by the concerns for others, but wanted the process of the eradication of the Jews to go through a legal process, which is why he implemented sterilization. Furthermore, the values of the Third Reich society undermined the democratic values as a whole. This is demonstrated through the Enabling Act that we referenced earlier, which undermined democratic values by completely removing the people's vote within the administration and placing sole government power under the Third Reich itself.
Now, to end off, I will conclude and summarize the ideas brought up today. If we consider the morals of Nazi Germany at the time, then Stuckart did in fact show moral courage in this case. He questioned the Führer's ideas, Hitler, and that was not the norm, and it was illegal due to the Enabling Act. In this case, he questioned if people with mixed Jewish blood should die instead of the norm, which would have been the final solution, as it was the Aryan race's job to kill all inferiors. And in this case, Jewish were inferiors to the Nazis. He did truly believe in the laws. He wasn't doing it for himself as many other Nazi officials did to try to protect himself if they had failed. This has shown that his laws got his son killed, and he didn't do anything to protect him. He did not believe himself to be above the law, as he was a lawyer in this case. So he was questioning Hitler. In this case, he was showing courage. But if we compare him to liberal democratic societies like our own, his views are not morally courageous at all. He still advocated for the slaughter of millions of people. He only was advocating for the less bad, the lesser evil, the sterilization of all mixed Jews, which is still pretty evil in nearly every right. So it really matters on the perspective you look at it. If you look at the laws and morals of Nazi Germany, then yes, he absolutely did. But then if you look at the morals of our own society, then it's a definitive no. Thank you.